hospice nurse gives her ideas of what happens after we die. I love this stuff. It doesn't mean I'm going to agree with it, but it is scintillating to have someone present things that we may never have considered before. I'm agnostic, by the way, so if that helps some of you folks understand where I come from. I like kind people. I like new bits of information that I can glean parts from and put in my mind. Like, I take yoga and I also teach yoga, but some of the worst classes that I've ever taken in yoga, I've always gotten like one thing from that instructor that I was able to use. Whereas really good teachers, there's plenty of it. Sometimes there's too much good stuff to retain it all and put into your own practice. So that's how I look at arguments or positions that I disagree with. Even if it's really bad, there's something in there, some perspective that I had not considered, and that contributes to my overall wealth of understanding. So let's see what the hospice nurse says.
I've witnessed hundreds of deaths, and here's what I think happens after we die. And this is also the reason why I don't fear death. I believe we are all going to a place that feels more like home than here ever could. I know this is just my belief, so I really don't want this to feel like I'm pushing my belief onto you. I just want you to know what I do believe, because people ask me all the time if I believe in an afterlife, and I do. I don't fear it because it feels to me like I'm going to go back to a place that I've always known. And the more times I've watched someone take their last breath, the more and more I believe this to be true. Because when I watch it, because my grief is removed, it's not my loved one dying. It's like I can just be present there. And when I'm present there watching this, it's like I can feel like they're so close to that place that I once knew. And there's something about me being around them that makes me feel close to it again. And almost like homesick. I always say, ever since I've been a little girl, I have always felt homesick. I've always felt homesick for a place that I can't remember. It's like, I know it, but I don't. And when I'm watching someone take their last breath, I can feel that place again. And it feels good. And it feels like home. And I get that same feeling when I've watched babies being born. You know, before I was a hospice nurse, I wasn't an L&D nurse, but I have witnessed, friends and loved ones and just videos of babies being born, and even like a month-old baby, if I'm holding a baby. I've always felt this feeling of like, they just know something. They've been to the place that I can't quite remember.
This has shades of like reincarnation and the ideas of reincarnation, although in this case, reincarnated as a human. And you die, and then your soul or spirit or whatever would come back in another human. It doesn't happen to be my perspective on things, but I do understand. And I do know people, my yoga teacher actually has this idea. But if you don't live a good life here, in her theology, and she grew up in India, is one of the least judgmental, most beautiful people that I know, you could come back as a turtle. You could come back as any kind of living creature. And so you just really want to be a good steward of your own humanity while you're here. But what she's saying is that babies seem to have been somewhere and they know something. And Plato kind of had that idea, not entirely with this world of the forms that you could go up, study it, come back down, but we can't understand perfect archetypes or perfect forms of, say, justice or freedom or whatever the archetype might be that we'd like there to be some idea of perfection for. That those ideas exist up there in the world of the forms. And in that sense, it's a very spiritual concept or metaphysical idea where you can't prove it, you can't find it, can't discover it. We can only contemplate it. And she's sort of going not to those exact places, obviously, because she has her own perspective, but in a reincarnative state, like they've been somewhere good, like home. They're being reborn, but when you die, you go back to that home.
And I've always loved being around babies and being around the miracle of birth, because it feels like this miracle of they've just been to that place that we are all going. and it feels so good to be around them. And that's the exact feeling I feel when I'm around people who are dying. Hence why I don't fear death. I feel sad in the sense of like, I understand it's a sad moment when someone's dying, but there's also a feeling of like sacredness and a feeling of like home, like a familiar feeling. And death and birth almost feel like the same to me. It almost feels the same because I believe like the baby is coming from where we come from and the person dying is going back to where we come from. So to me, it's not a place like we have to get into. It's a place that we come from. Like I believe I'm going to close my eyes when I die and, wake up and be like, oh, thank God. Thank God I'm back. And then I'm going to be like, why'd you keep me there so long? Why'd you leave me there so long? Like, right? I don't feel like here is our true home.
This earth is inhospitable. I've said no matter how much money you have, no matter the creature comforts you've got, this place is a very challenging place to live. There are so many things that we live with on a daily basis, whether people are telling the truth to us. I mean, just whatever it may be, every nuance of our life, there are certain struggles that we entertain with it.
I feel like we have another home that we are going to go back to. And once we get there, we're going to remember all of that. So it won't feel scary. It'll just feel peaceful and beautiful and lovely. And I don't believe you have to believe in a certain thing to get there. I don't even think you have to believe in what I'm saying to get there. Like I said, it's not a place to get into or a belief to follow. I think it is just what it is. And I know I could be wrong. So please know that in me saying all of this, I know I could be wrong. I know it's just my belief. That is just my belief system. Hence why I would never preach it onto anybody else. And I know I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, that's okay too. It doesn't feel like I'm wrong, but that doesn't mean I'm not. I've always had this need and want for like answers about like where we come from, why are we here, where do we go when we die. I've always been like that. I've always been a seeker, and I've always been interested in the meaning of life and where we go after we die. And after becoming a hospice nurse, and a lot of the experiences I've had, whether they were really crazy, which I can get into stories like that, or just subtle things like watching someone take their last breath and just getting this feeling of like love and joy and peace, kind of like I felt, like I said, when I would see babies being born, or even when I would be meditating or praying, it'd be the same feeling. So it just started solidifying more and more my beliefs that we all go to this place that is good. Some of my extreme things are like my experience that I've just now learned is called a shared death experience. I've shared this before, but I had a patient who I was really close with who was dying on hospice, and I went to go see him right before he died. I can tell he would die that day, and I said my goodbyes to him in my head and like made peace with his death. I was happy for him. I knew we did a good job, and I knew that he was having a peaceful death. And when I went in my car, I said my final goodbye in my car before I, turned it on to go to my next patient. And all of a sudden I could hear his voice, and I could feel these feelings, the feelings that I frequently feel that kind of feel like what I would think the afterlife would feel like, like home, like comfort, like joy and exuberance. And I instantly smiled telling this story because I can feel what he was showing me that day. And I heard his voice in my head, and he was saying, "Oh my gosh, Julie, oh my gosh, I can't believe it." And the sentiment was, if I only would have known how good this was, I wouldn't have been so afraid, because he was afraid and he was curious and he wasn't sure what was going to happen after he died. And then it's like in my car, he gave me this experience of like, I'm okay. This is amazing. If I only would have known how good this is, I wouldn't have been so afraid. And those feelings he was giving me that brought me to tears, I was weeping in my car, are the same feelings that I get when I watch someone, subtly take their last breath, or I watch a baby being born. It's like an overwhelming feeling of joy and peace and grace and love. And that is what I think we go to. That is what I think the afterlife is. Does that mean we're like in human form? I don't know any of that. I have no idea, but I feel like it doesn't feel bad or scary. It feels, again, more like home than we could ever feel here.
Yeah. All right. That's very cool. Whether you agree with it or not, it is good. I mean, people who are involved in that field in hospice. Now, I took care of my mother in Florida for a couple of years while she had been diagnosed. She was asymptomatic, but she was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And she survived breast cancer 40 years earlier. And it was metastatic, so it had spread throughout her body. And so when I was taking care of her, she was bedridden. She was on hospice, and so they would come in a couple times a week. The doctor would come every couple of weeks maybe, but the hospice nurses, they would come, I think, 3 times a week. And I didn't want her passing away in some kind of nursing home or strange place, where my whole grounding idea for taking care of her was I couldn't imagine in your last months of life staring up at a strange ceiling. Because she lived in the house that she'd been in with my stepfather for over 20 years, and you get accustomed to that as being home, your home. Now go into some, sterile environment, so to speak, with fluorescent lights above you and a drop ceiling or whatever the way it's made out. It's not your place. And when you're older, change is harder to accept. And, there's a difference between death and dying. Death is the state of being dead. Dying is the process of getting there, and it's the dying that sucks because it is painful. We are sentient beings. We like joy and happiness rather than sorrow and pain, and that much is obvious, but sometimes you state the obvious when you're talking about these things. And I know the more you do something, the more calloused you become to it. Construction workers, for example, have to be harnessed in when they're up on the beams, because when you're up at that height long enough, it's so second nature to you that you might forget that one tiny mistake and pew, you come down and die, for example, and you just get comfortable in that environment. Or you're working up on a roof. I know this, for example, because, just from doing work around my house, spending time up on the roof, you just get accustomed to it. And then you realize, gosh, at some point, you have to stay on your game the whole time, because you do get used to it. And it's the same thing with a hospice nurse, where the more and more you're around somebody who takes their last breath, and you see the cycle of life, and you think about it, you feel it, you watch it, it doesn't concern you as much in ways. You might be able to think more dispassionately about what it all means. You can reflect on your own thoughts without being grossed out by the one time you saw somebody die, for example. So obviously she's got her own perspective. And I love it when people say, like, this is my view. I'm not going to preach it. I'm not going to say this is how it works. I'm just going to say this is my view. I can listen to anybody when they present their own view. I don't care how crazy it is, as long as they're not saying this is the way it is, or suggest in any emphatic way that I should believe it because I'll be better off for it. And she did a really beautiful presentation of her view of life and death, and the revolving door of going home and coming back. I did have the thought in there before she said it that, all right, so if when you die, you go home to this place of peacefulness, it must suck to be thrown back into this world of unpeacefulness as a newborn. And as somebody who's been on the planet 63 years, I look at younger folks and I'm like, gosh, you have a lot of work ahead of you. There is joy in life to be found, but there's also pain. It's I'm divorced. And so when I go to a wedding, I feel very happy that the couple found love, and they've got dreams and they've got hopes, and they're living that intense beauty. But of course, part of me also worries that half marriages end in divorce, and I know the pain of one, and I'm like, oh gosh, please make this work. Please listen to each other, respect each other, to be tolerant of each other. You're going to be tired when you have children all the time. Don't take it out on each other. Don't nitpick each other. And when it comes to listening to somebody with a hospice nurse's experience, they are unique. It's no different than a gynecologist obstetrician that brings babies into the world right out of the womb, and they're involved in that, and just the quote-unquote miracle of life, the intensity of this is a new human being. This is a whole new creature. What's it going to become? All this. The hospice nurse herself sees them exit the world, but is familiar with the process of babies coming into the world. and she herself is a woman. I don't know if she has kids. I'd be curious to see if she doesn't, but eventually goes on to have children, what her perspective would be. It might be intensified, or might add additional information to her. So anyway, all right, folks, if there's a particular video that you think might be worth watching, and it's not just on life and death, but these kinds of things are scintillating. They give you a lot of information or ideas to contemplate when you're just driving down the road or just sitting around wondering what's what. You might be bedside when somebody dies as well at some point, and maybe some of these ideas pop into your head and provide you comfort, or maybe they don't. It's still kind of cool to maintain that curiosity about life and how it might work. Anyway, there you go. Thanks for playing along. Have a great day. I'll see you on another video, and keep thinking philosophically.